Hey guys, it's Chad from the Teach Better team, and I am here with the amazing Tracy Browder. Tracy, how are you doing tonight?
I'm awesome. I'm awesome. Feeling wonderful.
So, Tracy just moderated our mastery chat, and I loved tonight's topic, Tracy. It was COVID, race, and relationships. Now, a lot of you don't know this, but I've been really lucky this week, and I've gotten to talk to Tracy for like a lot this week because Tracy had me on her amazing podcast. So we got to have a really nice conversation.
Mhm.
But we love Tracy on the Teach Better team. So I've been getting to talk to Tracy a lot. And every time I do, I take something meaningful and amazing away. So I'm so glad to have her here tonight. So, Tracy, Andrea, how are you doing? We got people stopping in saying hi. I love it. If you are watching this live, just put hashtag live. And if you are watching this on the replay later tonight or tomorrow morning, just put hashtag replay. So, Tracy, um, that was a great mastery chat. It was absolutely fantastic. So, how are you feeling overall about how the chat went?
I feel so hopeful is the word. The topic was COVID, race, and relationships, and conversation was wonderful. It's like, people get it. Someone posted something and I was like, oh my gosh, you see me. And he was talking about his students, but just something he said, like, you see me. Oh, I know what it was. He said, we're working to build an anti-racism culture, not a colorblind culture. And
Yeah.
like, I have goosebumps right now just saying that because I read it actually as fast as the chat was going, Chad. I reread that like 3 times because I'm like, you see me, which means you see my babies, which means
I
you see
love
students who look like me. Um, yeah, so it was beautiful. I feel wonderful. I feel so hopeful. I mean, people shared so many emotions, but the bottom line was hope will be better together because we're going to be with our kids. We're going to be real and transparent, and we're just going to do it together. All of it.
Oh man, I
Race,
love it.
relationships, all of it.
I love it. We have Adam Katos, we have Kate, Maggie, Van, Andrea, Nikki. We got so many people kind of joining us in for this recap. I
Awesome.
absolutely love this. But I love the discussion around sort of anti-racism, so an active anti-racist attitude versus colorblindness, right? So Maurice Martin, one of our Speakers Network speakers, he says, colorblindness is, are you saying you're colorblind or are you just walking around with your eyes closed? That's kind of his statement, right?
Mhm.
And I think we're at a point, and I think you'd agree based on what you just said, that like it's no longer enough to agree that it's wrong. It's no longer enough to kind of sit back and go, yeah, I see all this inequity and I don't like it. And I'm just happy here sitting on the sideline because it doesn't really affect me. And I think that's really the difference I'm starting to feel both in these conversations for change, as well as just overall with these ongoing conversations is people I feel like, and you can tell me if you agree or disagree,
Mhm.
but I think that hope that you were talking about is important. People are starting to feel like, no, I have to actively fight against this. I have to actively do my part to build this anti-racist culture. That definitely came through to me, and I feel like it came through to you as well a little bit.
Absolutely. I think people are realizing to be passive equates to doing nothing
Right.
in race when it comes to dismantling racism. If we're role models, and there was a lot of conversation about role models on the chat, being a role model is taking that active, bold step to dismantle the racism. And it's for a lot of people, it's uncomfortable. It's the unknown territory. But kids and adults and colleagues, we rather see you misstep than do nothing and then we figure it out together. That's growth.
Yes.
When we're just growing in life, we make mistakes. When we have our children, our own biological children, they make mistakes and we help them through it. This is no different. So we have to do it. We can't be scared. We can't retreat. We can't get quiet when resistance comes or when setbacks come, or when we do take a step and say something and somebody kind of bites out a little bit or lashes out. We can't just go in our corner and retreat. We have to keep going. We have to keep doing the work.
Oh man, so much awesome in that little piece, right? And I love one of the things you said really speaks to like my soul, because it sort of embodies the teach better mindset, right? Like fail beautifully, right? Because failure equates to growth, because
Absolutely.
if we're not failing, we're not trying. And I don't think this is a scenario where we have to be perfect, just like you're saying. But if we're not trying to be better and we're not trying to actively fight against this, we're standing still, which is the worst case scenario, right? So one of the undertones, I think, of this chat, and we talked a ton about this earlier this week on the podcast, so I'm hoping we can get a little bit to some of the stuff we talked about there, but we talked about relationships a lot. And I think you can solve a lot of this in terms of student-teacher relationships and sort of student-teacher efficacy, and sort of building this trust, breaking down these walls, and being an ally as opposed to an opposition, right? And to me, it really starts, and I'm going to let you expand on this, it really starts with just knowing your kids, knowing your students, and building those relationships, right?
It comes with, Chad, so many things. So especially now with COVID, race, spending a portion of last year at home.
Yeah.
The work is in the relationships. It's not in the content. It's not filling gaps, which is deficit thinking. That's a whole different conversation. It is truly about the relationships. It's about seeing each child as an individual and then seeing your collective class. It's about seeing each child in his or her own environment at home. It's about connecting with each family. I mean, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and do some hard work, but also some heart work. And our kids will be better for it. Our families will be better for it. They will love us. They will trust us. I mean, even with COVID, if we say, they know we don't have all the answers. But if we're honest and if we're vulnerable and transparent and say, you know what, I'm going to do my absolute best to protect your babies. Same thing with dismantling racism. You know what? I see your child. What is the struggle at home? Talk to families, talk to parents, hear each individual story, because there are so many stories. But the other piece of this too is I want to do my part for other races to help educate in love, help bring that awareness, and not just be this, I'm going to teach you, but I want to help you grow. I want to go on the journey with you.
Holistically. Yeah.
Exactly.
I love it, because we're teaching the whole child. We're not just teaching the math part of their brain or the reading part of their brain or the science part of their brain. We're teaching a human, a full human, and we have to acknowledge that.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to steal the heart work thing you just said. I think I'm going to start using that. I'll quote you every time I do. But that is absolutely fantastic. We have to do the heart work. And I truly believe that. I think it's really important too. Some schools are starting back in person, right? For at least a short amount of time or sometime every week. Now, I said at least a short amount of time because we don't know how long that's going to last based on how things are going on. And I think you bring up a great point. If we only get to see our kids for 1 month before things start closing or schedules change, what is most important to cover in those first few moments you have with your students? Is it pre-assessing them to see what they missed last year? Is it starting your work on chapter 1 or in the textbook or whatever that is? But no, it's not. To me, it's really like, let me establish this relationship, this trust, this equitable environment that I'm going to create, and let me establish this safe space so that even if you're not here, you know that I'm your ally, right? And I see you. And you keep repeating that. And I think that's something that um, that echoes every time I hear you talk and every time I get the opportunity to hear you speak, is like, see your students for who they are in every aspect of what that means. Could you talk a little bit more about that, just seeing who the student is?
So let's talk about the race component and
Absolutely.
my beautiful brown skin. You know, I talked to you about this a while back. You know, if we were in school, take away COVID-19, if we were in school when the tragic death of George Floyd happened, and that was really kind of the tipping point for America, there are some educators who would have gone and back in their classrooms and said absolutely nothing or acted like nothing happened. And I get the lower grade level kids, you know, there's certain things that we just have to be very careful about.
Sure.
But the older kids, high school, for instance, we can't walk into those classrooms and act like nothing happened, even if you don't know what to say. If I walk by a student and simply put my hand on his or her shoulder, they're going to know, you get it. You know what happened on the news last night.
Right, right.
So many of us, we don't sit down and watch the news. We continue, you know, if it weren't COVID-19, we continue with our normal routine when we get out of school. We're cooking dinner, we're going to all these sports practices, eating, laughing, talking. But then some families, like my family, we're having to sit down and look at the news. And you already know this, we live by a different code. We have to protect our families. So if we're having conversations, we're analyzing segments that happen on the news, we're talking to our kids, okay, if this happens to you, and we have to say that all the time, if this happens to you. So that's the conversation that's going on with my child at home, but then he goes to school and there's no conversation. Or he goes to school and he's a young Black man and he's automatically the first one that gets pulled if there's a crowd gathering, not fighting, just a crowd that's laughing. And if they're deemed too loud, they go straight to the Black male. So we have to take those blinders off. And I say blinders, we have to take those judgment lenses off. But
yeah.
if I'm having those conversations at home and my son goes to school and those same punitive relationships happen, you know, it's the Black male that has the highest referral rates. It's the Black male that has the highest out of school suspension rates.
And so, every bit of data supports that.
Yes. Yeah. So, you know, we that cycle has to stop. I think I kind of got off a little bit.
No, I just want to like let you go, Tracy. Like, you're just like, I could just sit back. I'm learning right now, just like everybody else, just like Van, Jeff, Adam, Andrea. We're all just learning with you right now. Okay. Well,
you know, so the thing is then, Chad, if when those things happen on the news, and then my child goes to school and nobody sees him.
Yeah.
Or he's pulled to the side or in the office, or, you know, but you're not seeing my beautiful Black, exceptionally gifted son, or my beautiful community service oriented son. You're not seeing my child. You know, same thing with those of us who have young Black girls. I'm saying the Black male, but it's the same conversation for Black young ladies. I've watched the news, and these beautiful Black girls at pool parties that the police have broken up have been thrown to the ground and knees on necks and all of that. Now, I will backtrack and say, since I did actually mention the word police officers, that I have such respect for our brothers and sisters in blue. It's just like any other profession. All it takes is a few. So I am by no means
heard. Yeah.
You know, saying anything towards the entire population of our brothers and sisters in blue, because their job is difficult. But we have to see our kids, and we have to look at the numbers. I use this phrase a lot that, you know, I call on schools to run the numbers. Let your numbers do the talking. Look at your data. How many of your Black male students are in the office, are suspended at home? How many of your Black females? And just keep running the numbers and you'll see the trends and see if you have a problem that needs to be addressed, because we have to look at Black students. On the one hand, I say we have to see color. We have to see color. But then at the same time, you have to stop looking at Black students, as the trouble population,
Absolutely. Right.
Stop doing that. We have to see them as beautiful, intelligent individuals, just like everyone else. And that's my challenge to everybody this year. When we watch the news, look at it as, let's say you have a student by the name of Donovan. That's one of my sons. Watch the news, look at Ahmaud Arbery and think of Donovan. Look at Botham Jean and think of Donovan. Look at these episodes on the news, these instances on the news. Think of your students, think of your colleagues, think of the people you work with, think of the people you go to church with, think of your doctors, think of people in your community. We are having the conversations with our kids to how to keep them safe, and not just from officers. Some of these things have been vigilantes, some of them have been hate crimes.
Right.
There's so much.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so a lot to unpack here. I think one of the big takeaways I'm feeling right now is when you see Ahmaud Arbery and the story about someone who's just trying to go on a run and their life ends because of it. Which I'm a runner, so I connected with that story. I also connected with the amount of privilege I have to not worry about it happening to me. So for me, I felt so crippled as a white male, able to get up and go for a run in my neighborhood without thinking about that for myself, right? Without thinking about what am I dressing in to go for a run, because people might view me a certain way if I'm running down the street, or can I run at night or the morning or at certain times of day? That's just really his story. Really just sort of hit me in a spot that I felt powerless because of my privilege prevented me from being able to fully empathize with that, because there's nothing I can do to feel that way. So the next best thing I can think of as myself is to act, is to speak out, is to share my outcry of rage for situations like this. But I love what you said is when you hear stories like this, like Ahmaud, like Floyd, like all of these people whose lives ended far too early. We have to see our students in those stories. We have to see them so that we don't just walk into class the next day and go, open your books to page 56.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And I like what you said, right? So you're having that conversation around your dinner table that night after watching the news, maybe that morning over breakfast. It's a heavy weight on your family. It's a heavy weight in that conversation. And then all of a sudden, they have to walk into a world, into a school, into a classroom that pretends or doesn't even acknowledge that this thing even happened. So what does that say to the value of what your family, community, and culture is valuing as the student, right? What messages are we sending, right? So I totally connect with, and I love how you phrase that. You so eloquently sort of put that together. I think that's amazing. And I also love that you said, look at your data. Let it do the talking for you. Staff Podcast said, to not use data is a sign of privilege. And I think it's absolutely spot on. So for us to go, we don't have to look at the data, I feel pretty good about it, is being ignorant in the first place, right? But it's also being afraid of what you'll find. And I think whether you're talking about content, data, scores, gap closure, whatever those things are, looking at your data, but especially with race, which is what we're talking about right now, looking at that data and being okay with it not looking good, and then doing something about it. Like you said, I'm going to come back to what you said before. Doing something is better than nothing, even if you're doing something and failing, right? So that is So much awesomeness right there. I'm so glad you just kind of went for a minute, because I was just washing myself in the wisdom of Tracy. And that was absolutely fantastic. Um, I don't want to keep you here all night. We've been here for about 20 minutes, but I do want to kind of talk a little bit more about the chat. Was there one message, was there one comment or discussion or question that really stood out to you, that you were really glad that you asked, or maybe that you regret asking, or maybe you wish you would have asked in a different way? Anything about the chat you would have changed, or something that you were like, I'm so glad I did it that way?
You know, Chad, I snagged a couple of screenshots of some people responded like, wow, I'm so glad you asked this question. And I saw that more than once. So
there are a lot of good ones.
I think the questions really resonated with people. And, you know, I kind of figured you might ask like what my favorite question was when I looked at these questions a little bit before the chat. And I kind of dissected each one. And what I take from all of these questions is, yes, it's about COVID, race, and relationships. But every question was at the core of the questions was selflessness and helping others. It was, how can we meet the needs and support one another? How can we facilitate discussions? How can we let them know their voices matter? How do you think the racial crisis is affecting our students? How can we support our students? How can we simultaneously dismantle racism and support students through a global pandemic? I mean, I looked at these questions and I was like, oh my goodness, this is really about facilitating, and not even facilitating, supporting each other and students through a global pandemic and social injustice uprising. I mean, it's powerful. So out of all of that, if you ask me the one question I think that really, really resonates with me the most, I think the one didn't really resonate with me the most necessarily, but I felt like it was the most powerful for participants who especially may not be very far along in their self-awareness in education and transformation and dismantling racism, is how can we simultaneously dismantle racism and support students through a global pandemic? You know, we've been talking all summer long in silos. We talk about COVID-19 over here. We talk about racism over here.
Great point.
I felt like somebody needed to tie those together, because our students are going to come in and face broken relationships, fear, racism, COVID-19. We got to put it all together. And so I think that was probably the most powerful question for me, because that was really my goal and my hope, is to help facilitate people to start thinking about packing all of this together.
Well, I think you did a fantastic job, and you did a wonderful job kind of crafting those questions to bring out a meaningful, a deep, and a reflective discussion on how we can change our practice. So before we leave, I usually like to end these recaps with sort of like a tip or like a first steps, right? So if someone participated in the chat tonight, let's assume it was their first time mastery chat, and they were like, Tracy Browder's doing it, I got to be there. And I love this topic. I mean, that's what I said, but I'm there anyway. But let's say they're like, you know what? This is true. I believe all of this. This is amazing. What can I do tomorrow? Or what can I do on that first day of school? Like, what's a first step I can take, as you said, kind of someone who's just starting this journey a minute ago? Let's assume that I'm someone who's just like finally realizing that I have to actively do something. I have to kind of make this change in myself to be better, to acknowledge who my students are in terms of race, in terms of inequity, in terms of all the injustice that's in the world. What would you say are some, or at least one, like practical steps I can take as an individual to be better in this arena tomorrow, to be better and to be more aware of these things tomorrow, or at least before school starts?
Well, I'm actually glad you asked that, Chad, because when we talk about the early steps of self-awareness and transformation in education, there's nothing wrong with what I'm about to say, but we so quickly want to make, go get a book and read a book to be your first thing. That's only one part of the education piece. I think one of the very, very first things I would say is to go on CNN, go on World News Tonight, and just start scrolling some of those news feeds so you can understand the scope and the magnitude and the reality, and learn about the Tatiana Jeffersons, the Breonna Taylors, Ahmaud Arbery. Learn the names. That's the first thing. Learn about the tragedies that have happened to these people. That will start unlocking the door to know the conversations that are happening in the homes of Black families. So that's the first step.
I love that.
Then start getting some books: White Fragility, Culturally Responsive, Just Mercy. Get those books. But I'm going to caution you, so many people on social media are saying, oh, I'm going to diversify my classroom library. That again is only one tiny, tiny piece. I would much rather, if I'm a student, that you talk to me and you see me than putting books on a bookshelf that we might not even have time to get to.
Or that the student might not even notice.
Exactly. So it's not about the things. It's not about the stuff. It's about us. It's about the relationships. So that's the first thing, is really digging deep into the news and understanding the reality and the scope of what's happening in our society. Then, of course, yes, pick up some books, but then also look within your community, look within your circle of your sphere of friends, and start making connections. And don't go to Black people and expect them to teach you. Do your own learning. And if you need some help digging through and processing something, I'd rather you come to me and say, look, I've been trying to read this. I can't figure this out. But don't come to me and expect me to be your history book, or, I know that sounds mean, but imagine.
No, you're 100%.
All of my friends, how emotionally exhausted. I don't have the capacity.
Depending on your network, you might run out of time in your day. Right?
Yes, exactly. So those are a few first steps.
Wow, I love that. And the thing I love about that is every single one of us has that news feed on our phone right now. Mm-hmm. Every single one of us can open up Apple News or CNN or whatever it is, and we can scroll. Mm-hmm. But now I'm hoping, after hearing that our audience and our network and our Teach Better family can look at that through a different lens. The other thing I loved about what you just said, and I'm going to be a lot more blunt because that's more my style, where yours like a lot more caring and stuff. Like, you sound better than I do a lot. but mine is like, it's not about checking a box. Like, that's what I just heard you say. It's not about checking a box and going, I have some African-American authors in my library now. It's not about checking a box and saying, I joined a book study on white fragility. It's not about checking a box and saying, I did X, Y, or Z, and now I'm done. So I did my part. I'm active now. I'm an anti-racist. It's about truly changing how we see the world, truly changing how we view the world, and how our students interact with us, and how our students interact with our class, our content, and ourselves. I absolutely love that, because you didn't focus on go buy a book, go do this, go read that. It was experience the world through a different lens so you can actually change and progress into someone better who believes and truly lives an anti-racist life, right? And that is absolutely fantastic. Well, Tracy, I absolutely enjoyed and loved this discussion, as I do all of our discussions. And I want to thank you for taking the time to not only moderate Mastery Chat, but to hang out with us here. I do want to let you get on with your evening. I'm going to let you say goodbye to everybody. I'm going to let you have the last word before we sign off, okay? And then I'll let you say goodbye. But for everyone else, I want you to have a great night, and I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to close us out.
All right. Well, Chad, Of course. Thank you. And I just love the Teach Better family. So I really appreciate the
We
opportunity.
love you too, Tracy.
I'm going to close with, I'm really glad Chad gave me an opportunity, because earlier when we were talking about going out to run, Chad said, he doesn't have to think about that. I'm going to leave you with a story. My 14-year-old, he's a football player. He runs track, very, very athletic. And in the COVID-19 shutdown, he asked, this was before Ahmaud Arbery, he asked if he could go outside and run to stay fit. My response, baby, you can't run. And he begged for days, baby, you can't run. Mom, why? It's like, remember Trayvon Martin? Baby, you can't run. And then a couple of days later, what happened to Ahmaud Arbery? And I sat him down. I turned on the news and I had him watch the news with me. And he's sitting there. And as he's watching, he just literally slumped over, because, that's what he wanted to do. He just wanted to go run. So, what everybody else gets to just go do, we don't get to just go do. You're looking at someone who went to JCPenney and got watched shopping, and they missed a white person stealing. Or I go into other stores and I'm watched just because I want to be Tracy and not mom and not teacher, and just get lost in browsing. And all of a sudden, everywhere I go, I'm being watched. So just know that it's real. It happens to people that you think it doesn't happen to. I walk around with such joy in my heart. Before George Floyd, nobody knew all these personal, intimate stories. And I could tell you so many stories, but I'm not doing that right now. But it's important for you to get outside of the bubble of privilege and realize that this is a problem, and it takes all of us, just like Chad and Teach Better and Mastery Chat, amplifying voices and trying to share awareness. It takes all of us. It doesn't just take the Black person, not just the white person. It takes all of us, Asian, Hispanic, Latino. It takes everybody doing this work together to dismantle racism.
Thank you. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for opening up, for sharing your story. I have nothing to add to that. I can't. I have nothing. Thank you, Tracy. I truly appreciate you. Everything you bring to the Teach Better team and to our audience. And thank you so much for hosting Mastery Chat tonight. And thank you for sharing your heart, your soul, your story, and your wisdom with us tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Bye. Thanks for watching, guys.